I'm working on the Leviathan Siege Dreadnaught. It's this big stompy guy here. It's quite a fun kit. Of course, you know how it is with me and Citadel kits. I think they're all fun pretty much. And I've been brush painting this and doing a lot of stippling to get some texture in there. And I'm real happy with how this is turning out. I like that stippling method. It just gives it a cool look, and I've also put some contrast paint over some of the stippled areas, and I like how that comes through. That's just one coat of contrast paint. I'll do some other stuff to it, but yeah, that's working out pretty good. But this is not about painting that. This is about building the base. Now you can see I've already started to do some work on it. Forgot to turn the camera on. But so this is pretty much take two. But what I want to do, I saw a video that Duncan Rhodes did. He does some videos for YouTube, some for his Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy site. And one of his public ones that he did was just about building a simple scratch build sci-fi type base. And I thought it looked pretty cool, and I wanted to just do something kind of like that. So my idea for this is I want to have, and I'm not, this is not based on lore. This is just me coming up with something that I think will look cool. But I want to have a flat area of the base to suggest some kind of, there's going to be, some kind of metal, plate there that is going to be the foundation for something. Spaceship, space fortress, warehouse, who knows. And there's going to be some dirt and rubble on one side of it, like maybe that, he busted through the wall, maybe not, who knows. I'm mainly going to add some rubble and dirt to it so I can put some dirt on his feet. That's going to be the main impetus, to just have some reason for that. But I want to have, to look like a metal plate floor. There's going to be some panel lines through it. And I want to have one small open hatch area, like it's an access hatch, opened up. And I'm going to have some wires hanging out like they've been pulled out and cut, just for some visual interest. Now, to have some room so that the wires look like they're coming out from underneath, I'm going to need two of these circles. And then one of them, I will just cut the middle of it out, so it will form a ring. That's what will go down first. Then this will go over it. And once I've cut something in there, there'll be some space underneath, and I can put wires under there and then pull them out how I want and do whatever I want with them. It'll just give me some room. So I need to start off by cutting another one of these circles. Now, the way I did this, and it's already set up for it, but I have one of these circle cutters. And what I did to figure out how wide I wanted it is I just put this sharp point here in the middle of the base, and then just measured just shy of the edge. I didn't want it hanging over the edge. So I just figured out the radius. And you remember from our early school days, the radius is half the circle, the diameter is all the way across it. So I'm figuring out the radius. My teacher said I would need this one day, and how little did she know that I really would in building models. But that's how I measured it. And this just screws down to lock it in place like that. This is from Olfa. There are others. But it's just basically a simple cutter. There's some that are compass-like. I like this one because the blade is vertical. With a compass, it's always going to be at a little bit of an angle, so you get a little bit of a bevel in the cut. That's not impossible to deal with, but it's something to consider. Now, this plastic card here, I don't know how thick it is. I threw away the package a long time ago. It's probably close to, well, it's fairly thick. I don't know if you can see that on camera. It's fairly thick. It's not one of those paper thin ones. I don't know that it's a 1/16 of an inch, but it's probably getting close to it. So somewhere in there. All I was really looking for was just something thick. I needed some thickness, just so that when I stacked one on top of the other, there would be just a little bit of space for some wiring to come out from under it. Now for cutting this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my little point right there in the middle, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to get over in that area where I already cut the circle. And then I'm going to move here, and I see that I need to move back just a little. And then I'm going to check over here, and I'm good over here, and I'm still good over here. And then what I'm going to do is, and you have to be careful when you're doing this, because if you pull and I apologize if my hands are getting in the way, but this is just really awkward to do. If you pull that point up at any time, at any point, then it can be really difficult to get it back. So what I do is, once I figure out where I want it, so I really push that in there. I mean, I don't worry about if there's a hole. If you're wanting that area to be flat later on, you can always go back and fill that in and sand it. And then holding this with one hand, I just start making the cut with the other. And sometimes I'll even move the plastic around under it. I'll twist the plastic like that. Well, it's running into my shelf over there, so I'll have to do it this way. I probably should have started it a little bit off here. I just realized I am way off center of camera. Hold on, let me readjust that. There, now my hands can be in the way, in the center of the camera. But I just go around, and I'm not really digging in too hard with the cutting blade, because I'm going to need to make multiple passes. And I'm not trying to cut all the way through. What I'm doing is I'm just scoring the surface, really. And if it starts digging in, lift up and just come back to it and just keep going around. All right, now it's not cut all the way through, but that's what I wanted. It's scored all the way around. It took about 6 passes, so you just have to, be patient, go with it. Then once it's scored, I just start bending the plastic, and once you get it to break in one area, pretty much after that, it's kind of weird to get it around these edges. You'd think these close edges would be easier to break, but it's actually more difficult along those. I could have cut in the middle of the plastic, but that uses way too much. You end up with way too much weird shapes left over. This is going to work for me here. And I've got my circle there. Now, there may be a little roughness around the edges. You can get a sanding stick or a file and just smooth that down, so that's not a big deal. The main thing one of the main things when you're using this is keep the pressure down. Don't lean into it one way or the other, because if the blade is pretty tough, but if it flexes in or out just a little bit, when you come back around, the circle will be misaligned, and all of a sudden now you're getting a nice spiral cut, which is not, ideal. So that's what you're looking for there. But now I've got my double thickness. So now what I need to do is I need to cut the center out of one of these, and because this one, when I cut it, I didn't bear down as hard, so the center hole is only on one side. I'm going to use this for my top one, and because this one I bared down a little harder, because I was having to try and get it done on camera, which is a little weirder. It's got the hole in the middle, then I'm just going to use this as the underlying layer. Okay, now I've got this cut out, and that will go here. I'll glue that on eventually, and that will go there over it, and they line up pretty well. And I'll just probably put some Mr. Surfacer around the edge to just kind of blend that in and sand that down, something like that. Who knows? But now I've got that like I want. Now I want a panel line running not quite across the middle, but maybe offset to one side. And then I want to have another one like coming off this way and another one coming off this way. I don't want them to be just like, a square or something like that. I want them a little offset. I just think it makes it look a little more visually interesting. But what I'll do is I'll use my my rule here. This goes back to my 10th grade year of high school, 1982, 83, I think it was. I was in a drafting class, and I've had this ever since. It was kind of useful in aircraft building because it's got a 1/4 scale ruler, so that's basically 1/48 scale. So I made use of that from time to time with my airplane work. But what I'll do is just hold that in place, make sure I've got it held down really good, and then I'll just take my scribing tool and just lightly scribe in a line like that. Get it started. I don't want to put too much pressure so that if the ruler slips that I'm in trouble. And I also don't want to cut through this. Okay. There. That's all I'm looking for, is just a line like that. Deep enough to hold wash. That's all I'm looking for. Let me make this a little easier on myself. I can hardly see what I'm doing, so I'm going to just draw in where the line is with a pencil. And now I've got it lined up here and here, so I know that this should be parallel or perpendicular to that line. I'm still doubting myself, so I'm going to draw it in just to verify that when I line up on that mark. Yep, that'll work. Now I'll scribe those lines in. All right, I penciled in those lines so you can see where I've got those, so I'm pretty happy with that. That gives me some panel lining on the floor, which is what I wanted, and just makes it a little visual interest. It gives you a little visual interest there. Now I'm going to use this scribing template and my little needle and a pin vise here. Now I'm going to do this off camera because I got to get right down on it so I can see what I'm doing. But I'm going to line up this edge and this edge with these lines here so that I'll know it's reasonably aligned with everything. And then I'm just going to cut that out, kind of like I did with the circle. I'm going to score it several times and get it fairly thin, and then I can punch it out and have that panel leaving a hole there. All right, I've got that cut out, and there's a little bit of roughness around it from when I broke it out. But what I'm going to do is just take this round file here and just go in and just kind of clean up that edge, and then clean up the edge of this, because my plan is to have it sitting like offset like that. So I'm not worried about if the shape is exactly perfect. It's gonna. My idea is that it's gonna represent something that was held in by some kind of fasteners, and you unfasten it and pull the hatch up, and then there's going to be cables coming out from under it. So I just need to clean up these edges just a little bit, and I'll just use a file for this, and then maybe once it's cleaned up, run this along a sanding stick like that, just to smooth that out. Okay, it helps turn the camera on. Okay, I've got this thing. I think it's called a Granger, and what it is got these little die pieces like this in various sizes that have an indent in the very end of it. So when you push it in, it leaves kind of a bolt-looking thing. Now, I did one already, and I pushed it a little too hard and almost pushed it through. I think I can push it back out. And, I'm looking at this now, and I'm thinking, I can put in some rivets. Look at that. It pushed through perfectly to the other side, and so if I'm careful, I can do rivets on something. That's a happy accident right there. But all you do is just push this down where you want it to go. Generally want to make sure it's lined up, Just push in a little bit like that. And there you've got some rivet detail. So let me go in and just do a little bit of that here and there and get that looking hopefully good. Now, while I am generally not a fan of any tester's products, I do find that I like keeping some of this glue around, because when you need to put a lot of glue down, this applicator is really handy. Sometimes what I do, I'm not going to do it in this case because that'll be a strong enough bond, but sometimes what I do, because that glue can take a lot longer to dry and so it slides around a little more, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take some Tamiya extra thin and run under the cracks and push it down, and that'll seal it in place better. Let's see, here's a test fit. You'll see now there's going to be some distance down there to have some wire underneath it, so it's not just looking like it's right there on the bottom. And what I may do is I may just sand that down a little bit to remove the texture, or maybe even just put a very thin sheet of plastic right over it. Well, it occurred to me when I put down this piece of sheet right here to cover up that texture, that if I took some round rod like this, kind of sanded it smooth on one side so it would fit, I can now have some stuff underneath the floor there going on. So just kind of adding things as I go along. That's one of the things that's fun about doing a base like this, is you just kind of make it up as you go along and see what happens. Now I've cut some small pieces, you can see them right down here, of this soft soldering wire, just this lead soldering wire. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these individual pieces and I'm going to stick them up through the top here and just bend them like that and glue them on the underside with super glue, and that way I can just bend them out however I want and position them, you know, however I want. I can have them, once they're glued in place, I can have them coming out across like that. I can have them laying on top of each other. I can have some folded back. I can just do whatever I want. But I'll have them coming from one point on one side and maybe another point on the other, look like they've been cut, and then I'll just kind of arrange them however I want. And I'll just keep adding wires until I think it looks good. All right, I glued that lead solder underneath there, and kind of bent some of it over the top, left some of it like that. Also put in some additional details here. That's a pencil line right there, but just added in some more bolt detail, some fastener detail. Put in one more door over here that's not open. Chose to go with a square on that one with rounded edges. And then I've got some additional, I did some pipe work in there and just some more of the lead solder, just super glued that in. Now what I can do is when I put that over there like that, then there's some stuff underneath, and hopefully it'll be a little more visually interesting. And then I'm going to have the hatch go somewhere like that, like it's just been set in place while cables are being severed. You know, you make up your own story about that. And then I'm planning on the model standing here, and then I'll put some of the debris that I talked about, just a little bit of it back here, just like there's the edge of a pile of debris, suggesting that there was a wall or something that he busted through to get in, and now he's inside this base or whatever it is. So that's where it's at right now. Now I'm going to prime this, of course, before painting it, but this area down here, because there's going to be some space that may be hard for the primer to reach, and I don't want any of this white plastic showing. I'm just going to very roughly brush on a couple of coats of Badger Stynylrez primer. You can brush paint this stuff on. It's not going to be as smooth as airbrushing it, but it's just a quick and easy way to to get some primer on there. I'm also going to paint the underside here just so I don't have any of that white area showing through. All right, you can see how that looks dry fitted in place. Just covered up that stuff in some shadow. I'm going to be using black primer on it, so it'll get the rest of that. I was just mainly concerned about, if somebody happened to hold it at such an angle that they looked under there, they didn't see any of that white plastic shining through. So now I'm ready to glue this part onto the rest of the base. So I'll add a generous amount of glue along here and get this positioned where I want it. I'm going to make sure the bond is really strong. I'm going to go in here and put in some Tamiya extra thin. I have to switch bottles soon, just around that edge to let that flow in there too. Don't want this top of this base going anywhere. And I'll put those clothespins around it just to clamp it down and I'll probably give it overnight to dry. All right, now to clean up this edge, I'm just going to go in and just spread in some Tamiya basic putty around there like that. Enough so that it'll probably take 2 layers, but it'll be enough so that I can go in with a sanding stick and just kind of sand that edge smooth. It's kind of like applying frosting to a cake. And now the sanding. This is probably going to take a while. And there it is. Didn't take as long as I thought. Just about 25 minutes to get it sanded down. Did a little polishing on it, cleaning up, and a little bit of rescribing the panel lines around the edges, and just generally getting it looking cleaned up. I'm not too worried about if the edge is super smooth. Just not gonna. There's a point of diminishing returns, I think, in this type of thing for sanding it down. I started with a 180 grit sanding stick, went up to 320, then 400, then finished off with an 800, and then just some cleanup. So looks like a really weird ice cream cookie sandwich. Next, what I want to do is I want to determine where I want the earth effects to be, the rubble stuff, because I don't want to have to try and make the figure stand on something uneven. I want it to be on this flat base. That'll just make things easier. But at the same time, I want to have some of that stuff, like I said, behind it. So what I'm doing here is I'm deciding how I want it placed on the base, and I kind of like this placement here because this is overthink, but you notice the panel lines are going this way, and they're kind of forming an arrow right here, which is pointing this way. So he's aligned along that to suggest movement, to suggest that's the direction he's going. Not that you couldn't figure that out, but that reinforces it, at least in my mind. And, that's a scary place anyway. But that's my thinking. It allows this little thing here to be kind of featured right below him, which helps tell the story, whatever the story is. Each individual person is going to look at it and have their own story to it. So that's my thinking there, which leaves this area back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pencil in that I want the rubble, and I'm going to reinforce that directional thing. I want the rubble to basically be here. Now, if it goes over it a little bit, it doesn't have to be precisely to that shape, but this lets me know about where I want it to be, because I want it to have some verticality, just a little bit of height, and I want it to be lower at the front and higher in the back, again, to suggest, something being knocked down. But that way I know where I need it to be, and it won't impede with the placement of the figure itself. Now, as far as the rubble I'm going to use, remember, he's got this claw thing that, I'm going to assume is, just going to like tear through stuff. And, you know, I can see it going through stone or something like that. So to reinforce that, I'm going to use this, I think it's shredded cork. I got it as packing material. Some part that I got, some small resin part was packed in the middle of this, and I decided to keep it. I would love to find out where I can get more of this, because this is great ground material. But I'm going to use some of this and some PVA glue to establish this area. All right, I've thinned some PVA glue, some white glue, Elmer's glue, whatever you want to call it, down with water, roughly 1-to-1 mixture. There's no precise mixture you need to use with this. If you want it to be a little more runny, add a little more water. If you want it to be a little thicker, use a little more glue, just whatever works. And I'm just going to paint this in right here to just kind of form a foundation for the initial coat of the rubble. And then I'm just going to sprinkle some of that on there. Now this will get a little messy, but that's okay. It's easy to clean up because this stuff is dry, so I'm not too worried about that. Now once I have that initial coat of it on there, I'm just going to start touching the brush into the stuff. Now some of it will come off. That's to be expected. And the way I deal with that is I just deal with that. And just keep putting it on there and just letting it flow through it like that. The more glue you get on there, the better it'll stick and hold in place. Now repeat the process, but just adding more towards the back here. Now I'm just going to paint some PVA glue along this wider area here, just a little. And just scatter a few pieces here and there, like this. Now I'll give him another test fit. And I think that will work. Yep, that's pretty much the look that I'm going for right there. Now I'll give this a little while to dry. Well, more than a little while. I'm going to be heading off to work here soon, so it'll get all day to dry. Later on in the process, once I'm actually getting closer to finishing up, I'll occasionally test fit the guy and decide if I want to add any more of that scatter, but at that point I'll just be doing it as literally individual pieces. So for now I'll leave it like that is. And I realize this video has gone on long enough, so I'm going to call this the video because the next step will be priming and then painting it. I'm not going to do anything more to develop the base, so it's essentially done. So I will call this a video and look for, and I'll go ahead and just do this one, even though this is a long video, I'll go ahead and release this one the same week that this one comes out, so that my plan is this first video will come out on Tuesday, the painting of this, the painting and weathering of the base will come out on Thursday, and then the video covering the painting of this character, this guy, will be on Friday. So you'll get a week of this thing this week that's coming up. So hope that's okay. Lots of video, but I'm having a lot more fun with this base than I realized I would. So I just want to keep going with it. So as always, thank you so much for being a patron. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.